Hello everybody, welcome back to another reaction video. In this video, I'm going to be reacting to Chapter 1 of my fantasy debut novel called Breaking. In the previous episode, I reacted to my prologue for the book, narrated by Ryan Shukas. In this one, he has narrated, I hope expertly so, Chapter 1 of my book. So, I'm excited. I'm not worried at all based on how he did on the prologue. Just fantastic. Excited for Chapter 1. And Chapter 1 will be interesting because this is where the three main characters come into play right from the beginning. So we're going to see how he goes from one to the other. One of them is a female voice as well. A lot of stuff happening in this chapter, so I am excited. Let's not waste any more time. Let's get right into it.
Chapter 1. Tamlin watched Fyevna gaze toward the overcast sky. The billowing clouds of dark purple from the night had begun to turn a lighter violet with the coming of the morning. She held before her a rounded wooden contraption small enough for her to set steadily in the palm of her hand. Tamlin stood a good distance in front of Fyevna and watched her absent eyes stare into the dark clouds above them. Her light, steel-gray skin seemed to glow faintly.
So, kind of based off the prologue, if you listen to the prologue, this Chapter 1 kind of picks up where it leaves off as far as like reminding you of the environment that the world is in. So we kind of have the purple clouds above, the kind of the steel, kind of cool gray skin that the inhabitants have, and just kind of reminding you of that before getting to the specific characteristics of each of the characters. Just kind of want to keep the reader into that world. And again, Ryan just man, I feel like I probably will listen to my book on repeat, as sick as I am of reading my book, this first book, over and over and over to edit more and more and more. I feel like that I could listen to Ryan read to me all day long. So anyway, let's keep getting into it. I'll try not to pause it as frequently. This is a longer chapter, so we'll try to keep it down.
The dawn's violet lights reflecting off her face in an entrancing way. The night clouds over Zayeth, Fyevna's soul city, never darkened like they did this far away from the city, and the color blend the dimness created felt foreign to him. Fyevna's long and flowing white hair lightened with each passing minute as night turned to day. Though Fyevna was just shy of her 20th year, 3 years Tamlin's junior, she held herself with a form and maturity that made her seem much older, as if she understood more and had experienced so much more in life than Tamlin ever could. The sound of snapping twigs diverted Tamlin's attention to the forest that circled around the clearing where he stood. From under the darkness of the trees appeared Narrate. Despite being accepted as a soldier, who were typically tall, Narrate stood only an inch taller than Tamlin. Regardless of Narrate's smaller height as a soldier, he was strong, with defined muscles on his lean frame. Nearly double Tamlin's age, there were noticeable lines across Narrate's face that Tamlin's did not possess.
So the names Tamlin, Narrate, Fyevna, the city name Zayeth, so many. I feel bad for Ryan. I probably apologized to him probably 20 or 30, 40, 50 times about just the naming of my book, and he pronounces the words flawlessly. It might seem very simple, but when you're reading it for the first time on paper, you know, if you're familiar with Lord of the Rings, everyone can kind of pronounce most of the names in there. But if you're not familiar with my works, and obviously Ryan isn't, and I'm barely familiar with my own, only being one book into it, Ryan painstakingly just, back and forth. Is this how you pronounce it? Is this how you pronounce it? And he would record it, and I would say yes, or tweak this just a little bit. And I felt very, like I was being very annoying towards him to do it, but he wanted to get it right, perfect. And hearing him read it just sounds like he's not even trying. He's just kind of flawlessly reading those words like they were in their normal vocabulary. So excellent work there.
The dark gray armor Narrate wore was made of Fyevna, a material formed from the bark of a tree of the same name. The Fyevna was several shades darker than Narrate's skin tone and looked dull in the low light. The same fry of protection was also made into a sheath for Nerate's sword at his side. Nerate approached Tanlin, softening his steps to avoid any more sudden sounds. Tanlin returned his attention to Sepheln. "Anything?" Nerate asked from Tanlin's side. "No," Tanlin whispered back with a voice that sounded light compared to Nerate's deeper voice. "And I don't think she's going to find anything either." "Seems she should. Threvenelt isn't far now. There should be at least a hint of the Zayeth she can find." Tanlin shook his head. No, I don't think so. She could see something this close, I agree, but if there's nothing for her to detect, then it's probably what we've been thinking."
I like the voice distinction there. Of course, Tamlin's trying to just be ever so slightly trying to whisper. I think we've all been in a situation, right, where we're trying to whisper but also be heard, right? And I think Ryan captures that, trying to talk just loud enough where someone besides can hear, but also still kind of keep that whisper. And very good defined voices between the two of them.
Maybe. Standing here, though, won't tell us, will it? We aren't more than a couple hours. How long has she been standing there? "Long enough," Tamlin answered. Sepheln had indeed been standing there longer than was necessary. If there was no Zayeth for her to see, then reaching Threvenelt as quickly as possible should be their course of action. Tanlin took a couple steps closer to her. "Sepheln," Tanlin said quietly, "if you haven't seen anything, maybe we should leave now." Sepheln didn't seem to notice what he said and continued her stance in the clearing. "Sepheln," Tanlin repeated, slightly louder. "I think—" "Sepheln!" Nerate shouted. Sepheln jumped at the shout and quickly cupped her empty hand over the file she was holding. "Don't be a fool, Nerate. I would have answered Tanlin when I was ready. What if I had dropped my Sieveth?" "You didn't drop it. Now let's get going. If you can't see anything, then there's no sense wasting away here." Tanlin could see Sepheln wasn't quite finished with Nerate's scolding.
Hate to break up the dialogue between the three here, but Nerate's voice is, kind of a deep, soldier-like voice, if you will, and Ryan's natural voice is deep as well, but I can still pick out his narration voice that he's narrating, telling the story versus switching over to narrate. Very enjoyable. And also Sepheln's voice, I like that he didn't go like super airy with it and try to be extremely feminine with the voice, because she has a more kind of collected, more calm voice. And I think him going just slightly feminine with it works perfectly.
But rather than continue with the back and forth with her Fyevna, her personal protector, Sepheln instead pulled out from one of her robe's pockets the seal for her round contraption.
Yeah, so the round contraption, the Sieveth, it holds a Zayeth, and it's what every CL11, which is what Sepheln is. Again, a lot of terminologies, but so she carries this to supply the village to the Zayeth to the villages, and so that's what she carries in her contraption, the Sieveth.
"Actually," Sepheln said, "I didn't see nothing." Then she paused for a moment. "Yes, I said that right. I didn't see nothing, or I guess I saw something is what I should have said. That would have been much clearer." Sepheln began sealing her small round device. The process was intricate, consisting of a cap, wires, and clasps that encased the entirety of the wooden vessel. "What did you see?" Tanlin asked. Sepheln hadn't spoken to him on a multitude of occasions seeing the Zayeth, as all CL11s could, but they were under a different circumstance now, dealing with something other than what was normal. Despite the urgency Tanlin felt for an answer, Sepheln seemed to be taking her time with sealing her Sieveth before answering the question. Perhaps she was making Nerate wait longer before they left the clearing, just to remind him who was in charge.
I love Ryan. He just knows the certain inflections of storytelling. Maybe not everyone likes I wouldn't even call it a dramatic reading, but he definitely it flexes his voice very noticeably at times. and like he'll slow down and say just to remind him, rather than very flatly that I hear in a lot of audiobooks, just to remind him. And I don't know, I don't like that form of storytelling. Like again, I kind of envision it where how I would want someone to read a story to me if I was sitting in front of them, how I would read to my children. I don't know. And so I think Ryan, again, I've kind of said this before, but Ryan, when he discusses each chapter by chapter for me to get the story beats, he really communicates the feeling in it, the emotions, how he wants to try to get it across to the reader. I mean, he's just phenomenal at what he does. Also, um, yeah, Ryan filled me in on a little secret. There was a problem with the audio the first time he did this chapter, and it is a long chapter. And so finishing it, he realized that there was the issue, and he re-recorded the whole thing right afterwards again. And so kudos to him for going through this whole chapter one, this big beginning chapter entirely one more time and giving it that 100% effort still. Just excellent.
That seemed like something Sepheln would do. I don't know what I saw, Sepheln said, and Narrate scoffed. Oh, for the love of El itself, let's get on with it then. Narrate tightened the pack on his back and started to walk away. I don't know what I saw, Sepheln repeated, this time forcefully, stopping Narrate in his tracks and forcing him to listen to her. I don't know, but it's something I've never seen before or have heard of any other Cielevnan seeing. Where there should have been normal flowing Zayeth, there was only black. Black? Tanlin asked. What do you mean by black? Were you seeing something else? Sepheln shook her head. That's why I concentrated so long. I didn't believe what I saw at first. I mean, how unusual would that be? But very distinctly I could see them. Little black specks that flowed toward Mezziot from the direction of Threvenelt. When dawn lightened the clouds, though, they disappeared. Tanlin stared at Sepheln, his brows furrowed. While different forms of the Zayeth had been recorded in the past, albeit with little evidence, he couldn't recall anyone having seen one with a black or spotted depiction. Tanlin had never read, of course, every book ever written on the Zayeth and its power, but he had read most, not to mention the hours and days spent listening to lectures about the Zayeth's possible origins and known behaviors. As important as the Zayeth was to the preservation of each of their lives, it was remarkable how little they truly understood its power.
I try to more comment on my writing than Ryan's voice here, which we know is superb. The writing is questionable. One thing that I wanted to do a chapter one, right? I wanted to accomplish a few different things. Obviously, introducing the characters, just normal stuff, introducing the story. But I really wanted to set the tone for who I am as a writer, and that's why I have this reaction up. That's why I have my. You can go listen to the prologue and the first two chapters on my YouTube page. You can read it by downloading it online on my website. So I want to give people an understanding of what they can expect from my writing, and a lot of my writing will be very much in depth into building the world, into building the characters. It's definitely very story driven first. I think characters, I hope, but my worlds are definitely built with a deep magic lore system involved in everything, and I never want that to overpower the story. I never want that to overpower the characters. But I feel like that the worlds that I share with my readers should feel real and should feel lived into the characters being talked about. So as Ryan is narrating this, and obviously as you're reading it, I want it to come across where, yeah, it's a lot to keep track of. There's a lot of terms, there's a lot of names, and there's a lot of systems in place. But I feel like that introducing it to the reader early, you'll be able to know right off the back if this is a book for you or not. And it's okay if it's not. If this is a book where it's not for you, totally fine. But there's a lot of people, because I know I'm one of them who enjoys this kind of stuff. There's a lot of people that read this and say, yeah, I love these deep-rooted systems, the moving parts, the world. And as long as, again, I never want that to overpower the story or the characters. Yeah, that's how I'm going to be writing a lot of my books. I will say this first book might be on the little heavier side than my other ones. at least in the near future that I have planned. But if you can get through these first few chapters and you enjoy it, there's something that you'll probably will like or not like. And if you like, you'll like the rest of the book. If you don't enjoy it, you probably won't enjoy the rest of the book. I think it'll be very black and white for you.
We should follow narrate, Tamlin said, walking towards Sepheln's warder. Narrate had already stepped into the darkened woods. You don't believe me? Sepheln asked. Tamlin looked back and saw the Fyevna not having moved from her place in the middle of the glade. Her arms were crossed, a telling sign from Sepheln that she wasn't going to move on until the matter was settled. I believe you saw what you said you saw, Sepheln. Once we reach Threvenelt, I'm sure we'll have our answer. Our situation isn't entirely unique, you know. It's been shown that quite often in the past the Zayeth was cut off between the villages and Mezayet. Each time it was due to someone not following the proper systems in place with no other factors involved. I know, Sepheln said, walking now toward Tamlin. It just seems odd, especially since it began in a weakened state. That's how we first noticed it, after all. You have your classes and your books, but I have my feelings, and I can actually see what's happening. I'm telling you, Tamlin, something is odd. Sepheln, Tamlin said. He thought he heard her slowen her step momentarily before continuing her normal pace. You're right. There are things that you see that I have never studied or written a paper about. But there is a reason that a Fyevna is required to choose a Fyevnathan. When one of us... I know, Tamlin, Sepheln said. No need to explain to me what I know already like I'm a child. Tamlin nodded and let the conversation end.
That was really good. Ryan did a very good job just conveying, again, not an overdramatic, emotional tale of what just happened there, the exchange between Sepheln and Tamlin, but just enough to convey that kind of tense emotion that Sepheln is feeling in the moment, and the dynamic between the two of them, building that relationship between up and giving it to the reader. Really good job with Tamlin's voice, Sepheln's voice, narrate's voice. Excellent job. And that's one of those things too where even like I have envisioned in my mind how each of those characters are supposed to sound, and Ryan and I have obviously talked back and forth about the characters quite a bit, but just really hit it head on of how I expect the characters to sound, the tone that they convey, the emotions that they show. So excellent job. All right, we got a long way for this chapter to go, so I'm going to let it play for quite a while now.
No need to press if it would only lead to further argument. Tamlin stepped to the side to let Sepheln walk in front of him and safely behind Narrate. The forest was almost too dark to walk through safely. Despite being able to see well in dim lights, the lights present in the city of Mezayet made it more difficult for those from the city to see in the dark compared to people from the villages. Narrate wished to press on as best as they could, even if it meant at a slower pace. But when Tamlin nearly rolled his ankle on a jutted tree root the first night after setting out from Mezayet, Narrate begrudgingly agreed not to travel at night. Actually, it had been Sepheln that convinced Narrate. Narrate ignored Tamlin's complaints until she spoke up for him. Tamlin thought on multiple occasions bringing up the fact that he was a Fyevnathan, which should supersede Narrate in any decision-making. He didn't mind Sepheln making decisions, since the decisions she made were mostly sound, but Narrate was a different story. Maybe one day he'd use his position against Narrate, but he felt content avoiding that battle as long as possible. Narrate led the trio onward and set a pace faster than their first 2 days. Threvenelt was not far away. Tamlin couldn't help but think if he had not been so soft, then they would have arrived the night before. Regardless, they would get there eventually and then finally end the questions that had been pressing them. There was even a decent chance he would be back in his studies by the end of the week. It was odd that the Zayeth dwindled from Threvenelt. Normally, the villages surrounding Meziyet would have an assigned Fyevna, who would make the venture from Meziyet every month to replenish the Zayeth in the villages to sustain the local people. Rarely would the Zayeth deplete before that time, and on those rare occasions a Fyevna would show up just a couple days later from Meziyet, ready to replenish each village. He knew something was odd about Threvenelts when it was reported to him. Only 2 weeks after the Zayeth had been replenished there, its tether to Meziyet began to diminish. Tanlin frowned, thinking about it. The Zayeth was either present or it was not, so a dwindling of its power seemed incorrect. But if everything Fyevna and the other Fyevna saw was to be believed, and there was no reason not to believe them, then a dwindling of the Zayeth is exactly what they were dealing with.
More so, I've kind of made comment on this before, but even more so than the dialogue and doing the character voices. My books are written in third person omniscient, so it's from the perspective of one character at a time. You kind of see what they see, and you're limited to other people's perspectives if you're familiar with that at all. And so the story right now is being told from Tanlin's mind, and I think Ryan does a great job of, again, even though he's not doing it in Tanlin's voice, the writing that I'm doing to tell the story, the prose, it still has those kind of thinking beats and the pauses and inflections of how someone might think of the situation and think about the story in their mind from Talen's perspective. I hope I'm kind of communicating that clearly, but again, I'm just overall very impressed with how Narrate is communicating the story of the book. Phenomenal job.
Tanlin followed Fyevna, watching her feet as she stepped across rocks and over roots. The violet morning light pierced through the trees. He didn't need to watch his step if he just placed his to match Fyevna's. What made this simple task difficult was the pattern of purple that decorated the ground. Some spots showed brilliantly bright from the cloud light, while others possessed a deeper color from the light shining through the leaves. Stepping through this palette was mesmerizing, and Tanlin had to look up and blink himself from the trance more than a handful of times. "We must be getting close?" Fyevna asked. Tanlin looked up and nearly stumbled as he did. "Yes," Narrate answered. "You'll have your questions answered shortly." Presently the trees thinned and eventually faded altogether. Before them was a low embankment, lined with a thick hedge of bushes and branches along the top. The first thing Tanlin always noticed about these bushes were the large thorns that filled them. He stepped closer to the grassy ridge and examined the hedge wall. Narrate shot his arm out, making him stop, and said, "Just wait. They know we're here." Tanlin stepped back and looked along the hedge. "I don't see anyone." "Neither do I," Fyevna said. "No one knows we're coming either." "Wait," Narrate repeated. "Even if you tried to march in yourself, you'd be hard-pressed to find the entrance. Just wait." Tanlin looked at the hedge and then at Narrate. The Fyevna was right. Though they had visited this village a few times previously, the entrance into Threvenelt was different on each of their visits. The people either found this useful in some way, or perhaps entertaining to watch visitors seek out the new locale to enter the village. Tanlin watched Narrate close his eyes and breathe deeply. Fyevna shrugged and sat on the ground. The grass was high and thick, and enclosed her slight stature effortlessly, and entwined with her flowing white hair. Tanlin scratched his neck, then pulled back his short hair a few times. Not that his appearance mattered much to Narrate or Fyevna, but as a Fyevnathan from Meziyet, he should represent himself as best he could. He looked down at his clothes. Gray seemed an odd choice, as it was so contrary to the white robes he and other Fyevnathan wore in Meziyet. But tradition for tradition's sake may be suitable enough reason from time to time. Whether he was fond of it or not, his garb would have to do. Narrate sighed loudly. He tapped the hilt of his sword as he looked along the wall of bushes.
Ryan didn't tell me he was going to put in little mini sound effects there. I actually, I kind of like it. Wasn't expecting that. The scratching on his neck there, and the little sword tap. I don't know, brings it like to life a little more. Sucks you right in. I'm kind of a fan of it. I like it.
Seeing Narrate's sword reminded Tanlin of his own, and he reached down to feel for it. Unlike Narrate's scabbard, Tanlin's was made of simple wood. The sword itself was not even his, but it was customary for anyone venturing out of Mezziot to carry one, save for the Sialevnin. Narrate was visibly irritated now and shifted his weight from one side to the other and scratched the top of his head. In fact, this was the most irritated Tanlin had seen Narrate since they were told they needed to make this special excursion. "It's a good thing you're patient, Narrate," Tanlin said. "This may take a while." Narrate huffed and stepped toward the embankment. Unfortunately, this meant that he had missed Tanlin's smirk. But there would be other opportunities to take advantage of Narrate's general disposition of irritation. "They know we're here," Narrate said as he began a stern march up the hill. "Where are they?" When Narrate had nearly reached the hedge wall, Fyevna stood and yelled, "Wait! Stop!" Narrate stopped and turned back. "What is—" "It's back, but worse," Fyevna said hurriedly. "The black Zayeth is strong now. The bits of black are thick and coming quickly over the hedge." Fyevna looked to be in a panic. Her eyes flashed back and forth above them, as if trying to locate the source of an echo. Tanlin stepped toward her to attract her attention. "Fyevna," he said. Fyevna blinked and turned her gaze to him. "We'll find out soon enough. Look ahead and stay close to Narrate." Fyevna, looking perturbed, nodded and moved forward. Tanlin looked up to see Narrate waiting for Fyevna to come near his side, before producing a journal and writing utensil from an inside pocket of his robe. Quickly, he scribbled in short form what Fyevna had spoken to him before following Narrate and Fyevna to the hedge. "What are you going to do?" asked Fyevna, staying a half step behind Narrate. "Get through this shocking wall." Narrate reached the top of the short embankment and stood in front of the hedge.
Yeah, so maybe it's a kind of a I don't know, a trope or whatever, but shocking is kind of a replace for some choice words from my book, just for reasons that might become apparent later on.
Tanlin settled his weight on one leg awkwardly on the slope and peered around Narrate. The hedge was thick, so much so that Tanlin couldn't see past the first couple feet of twisted and gnarled branches and full leaves. Thorns an inch long lined most of the branches. "No need for weapons when you have a hedge at your disposal," Tanlin said flatly. Narrate mumbled something that Tanlin couldn't make out. "Only way through is by someone granting us access from the other side," Narrate said. "It appears, though, either we are being ignored or there's no one on the other side." Narrate looked back at Tanlin with brows raised. "So, how do we get in?" Tanlin asked. "We need to hurry," Fyevna said. "Something is not right. The black, it's just not right, but I don't know what it is." "Same as before?" Tanlin looked above them, knowing he couldn't see what Fyevna could, but he stared anyway. "It hasn't stopped, and there's more, and they're going faster toward Mezziot. Oh, wait, they are changing." Fyevna turned from the hedge and toward the forest, in the direction of Mezziot. She stumbled a couple steps down the hill, her sight focused above her. "The black Zayeth reversed. Now it's going from Mezziot to Thravenelt." Fyevna's arms were stiff at her side and her fingers flexed and tensed. Her brows furrowed and she shook her head at what she was seeing. Tanlin was close enough to reach out to steady her, but instead his Fyevna mind took hold, and he opened his small black journal once again to jot down what Fyevna was describing. "Fyevna, I need you to tell me what you see," he said, already writing down Sepheln's most recent comments. Sepheln shook her head with closed eyes, but then opened them with determination and nodded once. This Zayeth is very different, she began. Black, not the normal shades of violet. But it's more than that. They are disjointed. They? Tamlin asked, pausing and looking up at Sepheln. Yes, they. The Zayeth normally is like a stream, a steady flow. These black... Sepheln paused a moment. Black droplets are separated. They look like specks, but some are considerably larger than others. And they're erratic. They are all moving directionally the same, but they shake and jump back and forth along the way, like they are unsure of themselves. Sepheln paused and Tamlin glanced at Narrate to assess his reaction. The warder still stood, facing the hedge of thorns. Tamlin doubted Narrate was even paying attention to Sepheln. Something as significant as a change in the Zayeth, and he just stood there. Tamlin focused his attention again on the gaping Sepheln. You said it's flowing toward Threvenelt. What do you mean? This time, Sepheln looked away from the light violet clouds and glared at Tamlin. What do you mean, what do I mean? Exactly what I said. It's not moving toward Mezziot, but to Threvenelt. The Cialevnim reverted her attention again to the air above her. It's just odd, Tamlin said. I don't remember ever reading the Zayeth reversing its course. Doesn't mean I'm lying or crazy, Sepheln snapped. Something's wrong, Narrate suddenly said. That's what I've been trying to tell you, Sepheln yelled. Something different than your Zayeth, beyond the... It's not my Zayeth, Sepheln huffed. It belongs to... Of course, Narrate said as he waved a hand. There's something else, though. Look. Narrate nodded to the barrier of bushes and branches. Tamlin noticed immediately something different about the hedge. The leaves, the branches, all of it seemed darker. Not only that, but the strength and immovability that its presence exerted seemed to wane. Leaves hung dully from their stems, and the branches took on a sickly look. Narrate stepped closer to the natural wall and pulled off a leaf. The Fyevna barely tugged as the leaf willingly departed from its dying bush. He rubbed the leaf between his fingers and sniffed it once before dropping it. Then he turned to Tamlin and Sepheln and lifted his open hand. Dark gray splotches coated the tips of his fingers. It's decayed, Narrate said,
I love that, because when you're reading it, all it says is all he says is it's decayed, right? But just Ryan just knows exactly the tone that I want Narrate to communicate in that moment. Brilliant.
Factly. It's gone now, Sepheln whispered. She stared past Narrate and Tamlin at the colorless barrier. But the plants continue to wane. Look. Tamlin watched Threvenelt's hedge wither at an accelerated rate, and for a moment thought his eyes must be playing tricks on him. The twisted branches and bunched leaves simply withered and fell until they lay flat, dead on the ground. They were now free to enter the village. Tamlin glanced at Sepheln, who was staring forward at the top of the ridge that would lead down into the village. Narrate rested his hand on the pommel of his sword at his side and slowly began to crest the small hill. Sepheln followed closely behind. Tamlin let them march on for a moment by themselves while he readied his journal and pencil again. He had only a couple pages written since they left Mezziot, but that would change with the recent events. He quickly scratched some details about the decaying of the plants. He could return later to provide a full description, but in the case things changed even further, he needed to jot down the present state of the vegetation to prepare an accurate record. Tamlin finished his last few thoughts as he began walking, and then slipped the book away again safely to his side. He expected to hear the crunch of the branches under his feet, but all life had been drained from the plants. Tamlin could not smell any mold, but the foliage was definitely withered away to a decayed state. The ground felt mushy with each step, like he was stepping on patches of moss. Cresting the hill finally provided him with a view of What happened? Tanlin said to himself. He paused in his steps as he gazed down at Threvenelt. The small village rested in a wide depression in the ground, surrounded by the hill and, prior to just now, the hedge that shut it in. The sudden plague that destroyed the natural barrier had also wilted every blade of grass and thing that took root around the entire hollow. Even the trees that canopied the village looked sullen, their leaves either having fallen off or hanging dully on limp branches. The killing of the vegetation was just one unusual thing, though. Threvenelt was empty. Save for Nerate and Sepheln, who were slowly approaching the first small home, no one in Tanlin's view moved. There were no children playing about, no one investigating and puzzling over the sudden rot that had infected the village. It was simply abandoned. Tanlin pulled out his book once again. Why even bother putting this thing away? There's enough here for me to write the day away. Tanlin walked slowly toward the village, steadying himself along the way as he wrote detailed descriptions of the state of the village. He wrote now in long form, preferring the full spelling of his words to tell the story that presented itself to him. Tanlin even wrote a quick note about Nerate and Sepheln as they walked into the village. Perhaps unnecessary, but still an apt depiction of a Fyevna and a Fyevna exploring the unique event. Nerate stepped cautiously into Threvenelt.
Just stop right there because it kind of transitions. So, I think one of the biggest comments I could give to Ryan is that at first when I start hearing him narrate the chapter, I'm thinking about all the stuff that I wrote and how I wrote it, and I see some stuff that I could have done maybe slightly differently. Fairly happy with how my first book went, and then quite quickly I get lost in his storytelling, and I'm just focusing on the story. And I guess two things. One, the only thing that I will give myself a very, very small pat on the back for is I'm always concerned that my prose, just how I write and tell the story, will come across awkward. Doesn't make sense. Doesn't flow well. But either to Ryan's great skill, my writing, or maybe a combination of both, the story I'm very pleased with, just has a really good flow to it. And obviously Ryan's narrating has a lot to do with that. Just hits the story beats very well, the emotions, the characters, fantastic job. So we're going to get into about 2/3 of the way done with this first chapter. It's a long one. Thank you for bearing with me. But we're going to finish it up. And this is interesting. I'm just going to give you a little heads up. It kind of switches the perspectives of the three characters. And I'm just kind of curious to see how Ryan's going to do with that.
Perhaps unnecessary, but still an apt depiction of a Fyevna and a Fyevna exploring the unique event. Nerate stepped cautiously into Threvenelt, his hand folded around the pommel of his sword. The tension of something obviously wrong in the village did not strike the Fyevna with fear or worry. No, Nerate embraced the unknown. Sepheln followed Nerate closely, stepping where he stepped. Nerate didn't necessarily mind having to act as a personal guard for Fyevna, except that it was excruciatingly boring most of the time.
That's perfect. I repeat myself, but I'm just so impressed with. That's what I love about Ryan's narration is a normal narrator would have just said, but Nerate found it excruciatingly, and then just kind of kept going. But instead, Ryan takes those thoughts that the characters are having and expresses them with inflection, with a good tone. Just an excellent job.
The position had been created so long ago that he didn't even know if a Fyevna had ever even used his blade in the past, or if it had only ever been for tradition. Even the trips to the outlying villages were little more than a change of scenery. None of Nerate's travels now delivered proper intensity like his time at the Voyev. The breaking. Shock the Voyev. This is my purpose now. Narrate told himself that too many times to count, but in this moment it may actually matter. The Vlyev had given Narrate purpose in life, what he had always thirsted to do. When all that ended, he was forced into becoming a Fyevna. Sephon, Narrate said, lowering his voice only slightly. Did you see any of that black stuff anymore? You mean the Zayeth? Sephon snapped. Whatever you want to call it. Do you see it? This girl wasn't so bad to deal with, except for her incessant correcting of everything. I don't. I see nothing now, except, of course, our personal Zayeth. We are still good, yes. Only been a couple days. Yes, Sephon answered. We haven't begun to fade just yet. Narrate nodded and continued his steady walk to the center of Threvenot. The fact that Sephon and the other Sialevnin could see the life force of the Zayeth within each person, within him, had always made Narrate feel uncomfortable, like someone were inside his mind listening to his thoughts. The village was bereft of any inhabitants, not just the presence of people, but any activity as well. The fire pits outside of homes and in social gathering areas had been out for at least a few days. Buckets of water that were set out for washing had soiled. If they had arrived a few days before, Narrate thought that still no one would be present to welcome them. Sephon tapped Narrate on the shoulder. There, Sephon said, pointing past the next set of homes. Narrate could see a large opening between the homes, the center of Threvenot, and where the village kept its eteth, the holder for the Zayeth. Why do they keep theirs in such an open area? Waste of space. Why wouldn't they? Sephon asked incredulously. I think it's a wonderful thing for a village to display their eteth, a welcoming sight to everyone. Ah, so welcoming in fact that the people never want to leave? Huh? Sephon huffed and marched past Narrate. Sephon, I need to go. If we were in danger, we would know by now, Narrate. Sephon hurried between two homes to the middle of Threvenot. Narrate stammered under his breath and followed after her. They just don't understand, Sephon told herself. She barely paid attention to her surroundings as she left Narrate behind her. They'll never get it. Not like me. Sephon forced herself to stop and take a deep breath. She needed more time to calm herself, but didn't want Narrate to catch up to her. She walked smoothly, stepping from between two of Threvenot's empty homes and into the middle of the small village. Unlike some of the other villages that skirted Mezayet, the villagers of Threvenot had decided to keep their town center empty. Grass, rotted now, would have filled the area, and the only structure, a tall stone basin, stood in the middle. Sephon walked across the openness. The Zayeth, that normally would be a colorful display of swirling purples around the basin, was non-existent. She didn't quite know why, but the lack of the life force made Sephon feel sad. What would have been an opportunity to see the Zayeth again, concentrated in one place, had instead turned into something hollow and foreboding. The stone container was simple here. Other villages Sephon visited displayed theirs sometimes on an ornate pedestal, or decorated the surrounding area with beautiful flora. Threvenot had decided to set theirs plainly in the opening, fastened to the ground on a forgetful wooden base. The vessel itself was tall, nearly to Sephon's neck. It was rounded and narrowed its way from the base to the lip. Inside the eteth was where water resided, as the conduit for the Zayeth. The narrow lip was sealed with a natural filter made from the same Fyevna armor that Narrate wore. The piece of Fyevna was pressed over the lip by a series of buckles and clasps that shut it firmly. The material would prevent pollution of the water, but still allow the Zayeth to pass freely in and out of the vase. The material would prevent pollution of the water, but still allow the Zayeth to pass freely in and out of the vase.
All right, obviously a double recording there, so I will make note of that too, Ryan.
At least that's what comforted the people. Sephon knew nothing could spoil the Zayeth, regardless of what physical contaminants found their way into the Eteth. Sefheln reached for the first clasp of the Eteth to undo when she heard the sound of pencil to parchment. She turned her attention to the side of the clearing where Tanlin stood. The Fyevnathan faced her, his eyes darting from paper to her, back to his pages, then up again to the Eteth. Sefheln could understand why Tanlin's job was important, but did he have to be so obnoxious about it? She probably shouldn't have been so annoyed by him journaling her every action. At least he took an interest in the Zayeth, unlike Narrate. But did he have to be so loud? Did they train to write with such force? Sefheln shook her head and continued unclasping the buckles to the Eteth. Tanlin saw Sefheln glare at him like he was an uninvited guest to her formal party. He normally would not have been taking detailed notes like this for such a simple task as replenishing the Eteth. But with the uniqueness of the situation, this could be something never seen before. At this thought, he paused and looked up at the lavender mid-morning clouds. If only I could actually see it. Relying on verbal details from Sefheln told the story each time of the Zayeth's movements and activity. Not once had anything been out of sorts in their time together. Even though Tanlin's desire to see the Zayeth was difficult to ignore, he was able to do so for the convenient reason that nothing exciting ever happened with the Zayeth. Now, though, with the black specks that Sefheln described, Tanlin was anxious to discover what she would find from the Eteth. Something was happening with the Zayeth here. Whether or not the activity still lingered would be discovered soon enough. The key was getting Sefheln to describe for him in each moment what was happening, so that the story was accurate. Tanlin shook his head. If only I could see. Sefheln had started unclasping the Fyevna cap, and Tanlin held his pen ready. She took her time finishing the last few and pulling back the ties. She took a deep breath and quickly removed the top. Tanlin held his pencil, as well as his breath, in anticipation for something to happen. Narrate had done the same, apparently. He stood at the edge of the clearing as well, and he stared unblinking at Sefheln should he need to assist in any way. Sefheln stood on her toes to be able to lean over and peer directly down into the Eteth. It's plain, she said, raising her voice so both Tanlin and Narrate could hear. And as she began to undo her Sieveth, no Zayeth at all. What are you doing? Tanlin asked. Sefheln cocked her head at him, just slight enough so he could see her glare before she returned her attention to her sealed contraption. What do you think I'm doing, Tanlin? I'm doing what we came here to do. Fill this Eteth. Wait! Tanlin shouted, striding forward with pencil tips still placed on his notebook. I'd like to see. Sefheln sighed and held her Sieveth above the Eteth, waiting for Tanlin to approach. Tanlin, in stride, finished jotting down a few more short notes before crossing the distance. Right, he said. Go for it. Without waiting longer, Sefheln lowered the Sieveth to the rim of the stone Eteth and poured a few drops in. Both Tanlin and Sefheln peered inside the Eteth. It was dark inside, the narrow neck not allowing much light to pass through. At first, Tanlin thought Sefheln was being careless in her describing the water as plain. There was no distinction between the water and the walls of the vessel with how dark it was. Move out of the way, Sefheln said, nudging him back. Tanlin watched Sefheln peer into the vessel. She shut one eye and stared with the other, switching back and forth when the opened eye began to dry. Sefheln sighed several times, shifting her weight sharply back and forth in irritation. Tanlin heard Narrate approach from behind them. Sefheln, maybe if you add more Zayeth to the Eteth, it would. Yes, of course, Sefheln shouted, still poking her sight down the vessel's neck. What a bright idea, wasting even more of our Zayeth. Why ever didn't they make you a CLevnin? Tanlin shook his head and glanced back at Narrate. The soldier either didn't notice Sepheln's sudden sharpness or didn't care. Sepheln finally looked up from the Eteth and closed her eyes.
Sorry, narrate. I just don't know what's happening.
There was a pause, but neither Narrate nor Tanlin said anything. So she continued.
I can't do much more other than throw some more Zayeth at it, but it's just a waste. There's no more of that black spotted Zayeth. Just nothing. I don't know what to do.
Tanlin cleared his throat and took a step forward.
Can I look? Please?
This time, Sepheln stepped aside and walked past Narrate, separating herself from her two companions. Tanlin tucked his journal and pencil away and stepped up to the Eteth again, staring down the neck with both eyes. It was difficult to see anything at all in the stone vessel. The Fyevna would normally see the Zayeth swirling inside the Eteth, but with it being tarnished in some way, short of pouring out the contents, making guesswork by staring into its dark depths was all that could be done. Chances are the Zayeth was just depleted, and all that was left was plain water, the simple medium that allowed the Zayeth to do its work. But that wouldn't answer what happened to the Zayeth Sepheln just poured in. Tanlin blinked several times, looking up at the purple and gray clouds, resetting his focus. Once more he looked down and black, deep black. Tanlin was no longer standing over the basin peering down into it, but instead the darkness had somehow reached up and covered him. He did not feel panic, though. A coolness started to spread over him. He couldn't sense from where it came, either from within or without, but a coolness permeated his skin and flooded his veins. Still, all Tanlin saw was black. A muffled noise interrupted Tanlin's dark trance. It sounded like someone yelling into a blanket. Tanlin blinked, or at least he thought he blinked, but there was no difference between closing his eyes and keeping them open. The blackness was there, surrounding him and held him. Louder now, the muffled noises sounded. Tanlin tried to ignore them, shut them out, but they persisted. Anger swelled in him now, the coolness beginning to rescind its presence.
No, he thought. Not yet.
But the coolness reversed its course, bringing back his normal body heat. The final tingling of the cold ran along his spine, sending a last shiver through him. Then the darkness peeled back, allowing him to see the violet light of day again. The muffled yelling was clearer now, and Tanlin knew it was Sepheln shouting. His normal faculties returning, Tanlin attuned his senses further away from the dark and back to his very real surroundings. Sepheln's voice was clear now as the last of the blackness retreated from him.
Tanlin, what is this fool's problem?
I'm back. I'm here. Tanlin glanced to his side and found Sepheln in disarray. The Fyevna's face was flushed from yelling, and she gritted her teeth at him.
And what was all that about?
Sepheln asked. Her tone suggested an immediate answer was the only appropriate response.
What?
Tanlin asked.
I don't know.
What do you mean?
What do I mean? What do I mean? I mean, you were just standing there, glazed look, eyes looking nowhere, not answering us?
Tanlin rubbed his eyes and shook his head, stepping away from the Eteth.
Just a trance is all, Tanlin said. Lost in thought, and my focus just locked in. Oh, locked in? Is that what they call it when you lose your Zayeth?
Tanlin started.
What? No, I don't.
Narrate stepped beside Sepheln, his presence silencing Tanlin. While the other soldier's face was calm and collected, his hands were white-knuckled on his sword's hilt, a detail Tanlin easily spotted. Tanlin lifted his eyes and stepped back.
All right, maybe you can answer me. since I apparently have no idea what's happening. What's going on? What's happened?
Fyevna scrunched her face and shook her head. She eyed him up and down a few times, then searched above and around him, eyes darting back and forth in bewilderment. At last, she looked into Tanlin's eyes.
Your Zayeth is gone, Tanlin. It's gone.
Chapter 1.
All right, that is the end of chapter 1. There's a lot I could probably say about. There's a lot I wanted to say about my writing, the story, different stuff I put in there that someone could ask questions about that may or may not be answered later on in the book. A lot happening in that first chapter. This is obviously a reaction to Ryan's audio, his narration, which is just superb, just fantastic. And it's interesting when it comes to, I guess, the same as writing, right? We all like certain authors, we all dislike certain authors. Same thing with the audiobooks. I personally struggle with getting into audiobooks. Ryan is like one of literally two that I like, Ryan and then Andy Serkis. And I like that Ryan just has his own different feel to how he narrates. He puts in a couple of those sound effects that I would think wouldn't work, and he didn't tell me he was going to put them in, but if anything, I don't know, I felt like it added a certain characteristic to it, him just adding a little personal touch, and I really liked it. I wouldn't think that it would something I didn't think that would be something I would like, but I did enjoy it. The characters, the way he communicated their emotions, the feelings, and just the pacing of the story, phenomenal job from him. I can't sing praises loud enough to how well he did. So very fantastic job. Thank you for listening this whole way. This has been a long episode. That was a long chapter. Yeah, if you enjoyed that, then buy Breaking. If you enjoyed listening to Ryan doing it, then buy the audiobook. I would love to have you read through it or listen through it. And yeah, shoot me questions about it. Leave comments if you have any questions about the book or something you might want to mention about like some lore stuff that I kind of placed in there. Anything you want to discuss for sure, but definitely go buy Breaking. It is my first debut epic fantasy novel. Support me, support Ryan, and we would just love to see you enjoy the book. Both of us would love it. If you do read it, if you have any comments, suggestions, or if you just want to praise it as much as I do, drop a comment. I will show Ryan everything that you have to say about him. He did a great job. So that was my reaction to listening to Chapter 1. Thank you for joining me, and I will see you next time.